My beloved child. Before your finger moves to the next moment, remain here just a little longer. There is a quiet reason your heart felt drawn to these words today. Some encounters seem ordinary until you discover they were preparing you for something you never imagined. This is one of those moments. Not because heaven has suddenly begun speaking in secret, but because this story may awaken something that has been sleeping inside your spirit for far too long. There is someone whose life has been quietly changing because of you. They have carried a secret through ordinary mornings, silent evenings, crowded streets, and restless nights. A secret so deeply buried that even they struggle to explain it to themselves. They smile when others are watching, but somewhere behind that smile lives a truth that refuses to disappear. Every attempt to ignore it only causes it to grow stronger. You have sensed pieces of this before. Not through perfect certainty. Not through impossible signs. But through those strange moments when your heart became unexpectedly still. When a familiar song lingered longer than usual. When the wind seemed to carry a memory you could not name. When you wondered why someone's presence continued to echo inside your thoughts even after the day had ended. Those moments were never meant to give you all the answers. They were invitations. The story begins long before either of you realized your paths were becoming connected. Imagine a quiet valley just before sunrise. The darkness has not completely disappeared, yet the first light has already begun painting the horizon with gentle gold. Birds remain silent. Trees stand patiently. Everything seems to be waiting for one perfect moment. Life often works that way. The greatest changes rarely announce themselves with noise. They arrive softly. Just like the beginning of this story. Someone looked at you one ordinary day. Perhaps you never noticed. Perhaps you did. But something inside them shifted forever. Not because you were trying to impress anyone. Not because you said extraordinary words. Simply because your presence awakened a feeling they had forgotten was possible. That frightened them. People often expect love to feel exciting. Few are prepared for how deeply it exposes the hidden corners of the heart. They tried convincing themselves it was temporary. Days passed. Weeks passed. Still your memory refused to leave. They buried themselves in work. They laughed with friends. They filled calendars with responsibilities. Yet every quiet moment returned to the same unanswered question. Why you? The question became heavier than the answer. Meanwhile, your own journey continued through seasons of uncertainty. Perhaps there were prayers whispered into empty rooms. Perhaps there were nights when you wondered whether anyone truly understood your heart. Perhaps you smiled for everyone else while carrying invisible weight inside. Stories like yours often include waiting. Not meaningless waiting. Sacred waiting. Even the seed beneath the soil appears forgotten before it breaks into life. Joseph waited in prison before walking into a palace. David waited in lonely fields before wearing a crown. Ruth walked through grief before discovering unexpected restoration. The waiting never defined their ending. It prepared them for it. Could the same be true for you? The answer may be closer than you imagine. Because while you questioned your own path, someone else was quietly questioning theirs. They noticed little details about you. The kindness you thought nobody remembered. The courage you displayed while believing no one was watching. The gentleness hidden beneath your strength. The compassion you offered even after disappointment. These were not invisible. Someone collected those moments like precious treasures. Without realizing it, you became part of a story unfolding inside another soul. But here is where everything changes. The secret they carry is not merely affection. It is far deeper. One evening, as rain gently touched the windows and the world outside seemed wrapped in silver shadows, they found themselves staring into the distance. Someone asked them a simple question. "What are you thinking about?" They almost answered honestly. Almost. Instead they smiled. Changed the subject. Looked away. Because speaking your name aloud felt too vulnerable. Some secrets become heavier each day they remain hidden. Have you ever carried words you desperately wanted to say but feared they might change everything? So have they. Their silence has never meant the absence of feeling. Sometimes silence is simply fear wearing another face. Fear whispers dangerous stories. What if they reject you? What if you misunderstand? What if the timing is wrong? What if everything falls apart? Fear can imprison even the most sincere heart. Yet something remarkable has begun happening. Every attempt they make to forget you somehow leads them back again. A familiar place reminds them of your smile. A sunrise reminds them of your hope. A simple conversation unexpectedly brings your memory into the room. Even the smallest moments seem to point toward one impossible truth. You continue appearing in places where only the heart can recognize someone. Coincidence? Or the beginning of something greater? No one can answer that for another person. But stories have a mysterious way of revealing patterns long before people recognize them. Remember Elijah. He expected God to appear through earthquake, wind, or fire. Instead, the presence came through a gentle whisper. Sometimes life changes not through dramatic events but through quiet awakenings that slowly transform everything. Perhaps this story is inviting you to notice the whispers rather than chase the noise. There is another layer to the secret. One they have never admitted to anyone. Not family. Not friends. Not even themselves completely. They believe meeting you changed more than their emotions. It changed the way they see their own future. Before crossing paths with you, they imagined one kind of life. Afterward, every picture of tomorrow somehow included your presence, even when they tried removing it. That realization unsettled them. Because dreams have a way of revealing desires we never intended to confess. Still, they remained silent. But silence has limits. Imagine a river blocked by stones. For a while the water appears calm. Then pressure quietly builds beneath the surface. Eventually the river finds another way forward. The heart behaves the same way. Hidden truth never remains hidden forever. And this is why today feels different. Not because every mystery has already been solved. Not because every answer has suddenly appeared. But because the current beneath the surface has become impossible to ignore. Something inside them has reached a turning point. They are standing between fear and honesty. Between comfort and courage. Between protecting themselves and revealing what has lived in their heart for so long. Yet there is one final piece of the secret they have guarded more carefully than anything else. It is the one truth they have never dared to place into words. And once it is spoken, nothing between you can ever feel the same again. A quiet dawn is approaching in this story, and with it comes a moment that neither of you expected. The sky is still painted with shades of blue and silver, while the world seems to pause between yesterday and tomorrow. It is in moments like these that hidden truths often rise to the surface. The secret your soulmate has carried for so long is no longer content to remain buried beneath ordinary conversations and silent glances. It has begun pressing against the walls they built around their heart, asking to be set free. Yet before that secret can be revealed, something inside them must change. They have spent so much time convincing themselves that protecting their feelings was the safest choice. They believed silence would spare them disappointment, that keeping everything hidden would somehow preserve the fragile hope they carried. But hope was never meant to be locked away. Like a lamp placed under a basket, its light grows dim until it is finally uncovered. There came a day when they found themselves walking alone beneath a wide evening sky. The wind carried the scent of fresh rain, and the first stars quietly appeared above them. They stopped without knowing why. In that stillness, every distraction faded. No voices. No busy schedules. No excuses. Only the quiet realization that every path they imagined for their future somehow curved back toward you. That realization startled them more than they expected. They whispered to themselves, "Why does every dream seem incomplete without this person?" It was not a question anyone else heard, but it echoed deeply within them. For the first time, they stopped trying to escape the answer. Meanwhile, your own journey continued. Some mornings began with confidence, while others carried uncertainty. Perhaps you questioned whether your prayers were making any difference. Perhaps you wondered if your season of waiting would ever end. Those thoughts are familiar to many hearts. Even the disciples once found themselves waiting behind closed doors, unsure of what tomorrow would bring. Yet the story was never over simply because they could not yet see the next chapter. Sometimes what feels like delay is actually preparation. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that lesson now. They started noticing how every attempt to move on only reminded them of what truly mattered. Conversations with other people felt strangely empty. Places that once brought excitement no longer held the same color. They laughed when expected, but the laughter faded quickly because something inside remained unfinished. Then an unexpected conversation changed everything. A close friend looked at them and asked a simple question. If you could tell one person exactly how you feel without being afraid, who would it be? The room grew quiet. Their heartbeats seemed louder than every other sound. Without planning to, your name entered their thoughts before any other. They did not answer immediately. Instead, they looked out of the window where sunlight was breaking through heavy clouds. It reminded them that light does not fight the darkness with noise. It simply arrives, and everything begins to change. That image stayed with them. Perhaps courage works the same way. Not as a sudden explosion of confidence, but as a gentle decision made one heartbeat at a time. There is another truth they have never spoken aloud. They admire the strength they see in you, but they also worry about the burdens you carry when no one else is watching. They have noticed moments when your smile seemed brighter than your heart actually felt. They have sensed that you often encourage others while quietly needing encouragement yourself. Whether those impressions are perfectly accurate or not, they have become part of the story they carry inside. This secret has never been about perfection. It has always been about connection. Like two rivers flowing through different landscapes before eventually meeting, your lives have been shaped by different experiences, different challenges, different victories. Yet somewhere beyond what either of you can fully understand, the currents continue moving toward the same destination. Think about Peter stepping onto the water. He did not know every wave that would rise beneath his feet. He simply chose to take one step. Sometimes the greatest transformations begin with a single act of trust rather than complete certainty. That is where your soulmate now stands. One step away from saying what has remained hidden. One step away from replacing fear with honesty. One step away from allowing hope to become stronger than hesitation. But there is still one obstacle standing in the way. It is not another person. It is not distance. It is not circumstance. It is a memory from their past that continues whispering, "If you open your heart again, you may lose everything." That old wound has quietly influenced every decision they have made since meeting you. Until now. Because something happened recently that they cannot ignore. A moment so unexpected, so deeply personal, that it shook the foundation of every excuse they had been holding on to. What happened during that moment is the final key to understanding the secret they have hidden for so long. And when that memory comes to light, you will finally understand why they believe your story together is far from over. The memory returned without warning. It was not during a grand celebration or an unforgettable event. It came in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, when sunlight slipped through a nearby window and everything around them appeared completely normal. Someone laughed in the distance. A page turned in a book. The world continued as if nothing unusual had happened. But inside them, everything shifted. They remembered the very first moment they realized you were different. Not because of what you looked like. Not because of impressive words. It was something much quieter. There was a kindness in the way you carried yourself, even when life seemed heavy. A strength that did not need attention. A hope that refused to disappear completely, even during difficult seasons. That memory became impossible to silence. For the first time, they admitted something they had hidden from everyone. "You have already changed me." Those words never reached another person's ears. They remained locked inside their heart. Yet speaking them, even in silence, felt like opening a door that had been closed for years. The strange thing was that once the door opened, more memories rushed in. They remembered moments when they almost reached out to you. Their hand paused above the phone. A message was written. Then erased. Another message was written. Deleted again. Not because they had nothing to say. Because they cared too much. They feared that one wrong sentence might push away the person who had quietly become so important to them. Fear often disguises itself as patience. But sometimes it is simply fear. As the days passed, they noticed something remarkable. No matter how busy life became, thoughts of you continued appearing in unexpected places. A sunrise reminded them of new beginnings. A flowing river reminded them that life keeps moving even after seasons of disappointment. A field of wildflowers reminded them that beautiful things often grow where nobody expected them to survive. Each ordinary moment carried an extraordinary reminder. You. Then came the evening that changed everything. The sky was filled with deep shades of orange and crimson as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon. They found themselves sitting alone, surrounded by silence. No music. No conversations. Only the sound of the wind moving gently through nearby trees. For reasons they could not explain, they opened an old notebook. Inside were unfinished dreams. Goals they once believed would define their future. Places they wanted to visit. Achievements they hoped to reach. As they turned each page, one surprising truth became impossible to ignore. Every dream written after meeting you somehow carried traces of your presence. Sometimes your name wasn't there. But your influence was. Without realizing it, they had begun imagining a future that felt brighter simply because they believed you were part of it. That discovery overwhelmed them. Not with fear this time. With clarity. The secret was no longer simply that they cared about you. The real secret was much deeper. They had begun praying for your happiness, even during moments when they believed they might never stand beside you. Think about that for a moment. They asked for blessings they might never personally witness. They hoped doors would open for you. They wished healing would find you. They quietly celebrated your victories from a distance. That kind of care asks for nothing in return. It simply hopes. It simply believes. It simply remains. In many ways, it reminded them of the story of the Good Shepherd, who cared deeply even when others failed to notice the value of what seemed lost. Genuine love does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it reveals itself through quiet faithfulness that continues long after convenience has disappeared. Yet another mystery remained. Why had they still not spoken? The answer was hidden inside an old disappointment they had never fully healed from. Years ago, they trusted someone with their whole heart. Instead of finding understanding, they found rejection. Instead of receiving honesty, they experienced silence. That wound convinced them that vulnerability was dangerous. So when real feelings for you began growing, they instinctively built walls around them. Those walls protected them for a season. But walls also keep joy outside. Recently, however, those walls have begun to crack. Not because someone forced them. Because truth has become stronger than fear. Every passing day makes pretending more difficult. Every passing day reminds them that some opportunities are too precious to lose through hesitation alone. And then, something happened that they never expected. Someone mentioned your name in a completely ordinary conversation. The room wasn't even talking about relationships. It was a random moment. Yet the instant they heard your name, their expression changed so visibly that everyone around them noticed. One person smiled knowingly. Another raised an eyebrow. A quiet voice finally asked, "Why does your face light up every time that name is mentioned?" The question caught them completely off guard. For a moment, they couldn't answer. Because deep inside, they realized they no longer wanted to hide the truth. But before a single honest word could leave their lips, someone else entered the room carrying news that would change the direction of this story forever. The conversation stopped the moment the door opened. Every eye in the room turned toward the newcomer, but your soulmate could only think about the question that still echoed inside their heart. Why does your face light up every time that name is mentioned? They had almost answered. For the first time, they had almost allowed the truth to become visible. Instead, they quietly lowered their eyes, hoping no one had noticed the emotion they could no longer control. But someone had. Sometimes people recognize feelings long before we admit them ourselves. The news that followed had nothing to do with romance, yet it carried an unexpected lesson. The visitor shared a story about someone who had waited too long to speak honestly and eventually lost the opportunity forever. The room fell silent. No one laughed. No one interrupted. Those simple words settled deeply into your soulmate's heart. They were no longer hearing someone else's story. It felt as though they were hearing their own future if they continued hiding. That night sleep refused to come easily. The moonlight stretched across the floor, and every passing hour seemed longer than the last. Questions circled endlessly. What if tomorrow never looks the way I expect? What if silence becomes my greatest regret? What if courage has been waiting for me all along? Sometimes the answers we seek arrive through questions we cannot escape. As dawn slowly painted the horizon with gentle gold, something inside them changed. Not all at once. Like winter quietly surrendering to spring. Like a single flower opening after months beneath the soil. Hope returned. It was fragile. But it was real. They realized that genuine affection is never measured by how perfectly everything unfolds. It is measured by the willingness to choose honesty over fear. The words from Scripture came gently to mind: perfect love drives out fear. They did not understand every detail of what lay ahead, but they understood one thing. Fear had been making their decisions for far too long. Now another voice was growing stronger. The quiet voice of hope. Meanwhile, your own path continued through ordinary days that never felt entirely ordinary. Perhaps there were moments when you sensed that life was preparing something you could not yet explain. Perhaps certain memories appeared unexpectedly. Perhaps familiar places suddenly carried unfamiliar emotions. Whether coincidence or simply the way stories unfold, your heart remained open even while answers stayed hidden. That openness matters more than you realize. Because hearts that remain open often recognize blessings long before they fully arrive. If this fictional story has encouraged your heart so far, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps these uplifting stories reach others who may need a little hope today, and it lets you continue this journey with us. There was still one secret your soulmate had never admitted. It was not simply that they loved who you were. It was that you inspired the person they wanted to become. Whenever they imagined becoming kinder, stronger, more patient, more faithful, your memory somehow appeared beside those dreams. Not because they expected you to change them, but because your example quietly challenged them to become better. That frightened them almost as much as it inspired them. Real transformation always asks us to leave something behind. Old fears. Old habits. Old excuses. And letting go is rarely comfortable. One afternoon they found themselves walking beside a quiet river. The water flowed steadily around stones that had rested there for years. They watched carefully. The river never argued with the obstacles. It simply continued forward until even the hardest stones became smooth. They smiled. Perhaps healing works the same way. Not through one dramatic moment, but through countless small moments of choosing hope again. Choosing grace again. Choosing faith again. Standing there, they made a silent promise. No matter how uncertain tomorrow appeared, they would no longer allow yesterday's disappointments to control tomorrow's possibilities. That promise became the beginning of their courage. Yet life had prepared one final surprise. Before they could speak honestly, before they could reveal everything, they discovered that someone else already knew the secret they had worked so hard to hide. Not because they had confessed it. Not because anyone had read a message. But because one unexpected person had been quietly watching the entire story unfold from the very beginning. And what that person chose to do next would force your soulmate to make a decision they could no longer postpone. The unexpected observer remained silent for a long time. They never interrupted. They never asked difficult questions. Instead, they simply watched as your soulmate struggled between courage and hesitation, between hope and uncertainty. Sometimes wisdom does not arrive with loud advice. Sometimes it waits patiently until the heart is finally ready to listen. One quiet afternoon, that person finally spoke. "You keep pretending nothing has changed," they said gently. "But every time someone mentions them, your entire expression changes. You cannot hide what your heart has already chosen." Those words settled like gentle rain on dry ground. There was no argument. No denial. Only silence. Because deep inside, your soulmate realized they had been seen more clearly than they had ever imagined. For so long they believed they were protecting their secret. In reality, the secret had already begun revealing itself through countless small moments. The way they smiled unexpectedly. The way they paused whenever your name appeared. The way hope quietly returned after remembering you. The heart often speaks before the lips ever do. That evening they walked beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The air was cool, and the world felt unusually peaceful. Looking upward, they remembered the promise given to Abraham, that even when the future seemed impossible to understand, faith could still lead toward unexpected blessings. That thought stayed with them. Perhaps they did not need every answer before taking the next step. Perhaps they simply needed enough courage for one honest moment. As they continued walking, another truth surfaced. The greatest secret they carried was never that they cared deeply for you. It was that they had quietly thanked God for your existence more times than they could count. Whenever life became overwhelming. Whenever disappointment tried to steal their peace. Whenever they questioned whether goodness still existed in the world. Thinking of you reminded them that kindness had not disappeared. Hope had not disappeared. Light had not disappeared. Whether they ever admitted those thoughts aloud or not, they became part of their daily prayers. Not prayers demanding certainty, but prayers asking for wisdom, for healing, for the courage to choose truth over fear. Meanwhile, your own story continued unfolding in ways you could not fully see. Some closed doors disappointed you. Some delays tested your patience. Some unanswered questions lingered longer than expected. Yet every chapter carried hidden preparation. A sculptor does not reveal the finished masterpiece with one strike of the chisel. Piece by piece. Day by day. The image slowly appears. Perhaps your own life has been shaped in ways that only become visible when looking back. That is one of the quiet mysteries woven throughout this fictional journey. Then something happened that neither of you expected. Your soulmate found an old photograph. It was simple. Nothing extraordinary. Yet holding it brought back an entire season of memories they thought had faded. They smiled. Then tears quietly filled their eyes. Not tears of regret alone. but tears of gratitude. Because they finally understood something they had been missing all along. Love is not measured only by the moments shared together. Sometimes it is measured by how deeply another person changes your heart, even during seasons of distance and silence. That realization became impossible to ignore. The walls they had built over the years no longer felt strong. They felt unnecessary. Every excuse that once sounded convincing now seemed empty. Every fear that once appeared overwhelming now looked smaller beside the possibility of honesty. A new chapter was waiting. Not guaranteed. Not perfectly mapped out. But waiting. As sunrise arrived the following morning, golden light spread across the landscape. Birds welcomed the new day. The wind carried the fresh scent of possibility. Standing there, your soulmate whispered words they had never spoken before. I don't want fear to write the rest of my story. Those few words changed everything inside them. Because courage rarely begins with dramatic speeches. It begins with one quiet decision. One honest heartbeat. One step toward the truth. Yet just as they prepared to take that step, a message arrived. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. But the moment they read it, their eyes widened, and their heart began racing. Everything they believed about the timing of this journey suddenly changed. They realized the secret was no longer theirs alone to carry. Someone else had already set events into motion. And what awaited them next would reveal a truth so unexpected that neither heart would ever see the future in quite the same way again.